Hey, Joe Solari here, and welcome back to the business of writing. It's been a while since I put an episode together. Sorry about that if you've been waiting, but I've been pretty busy. I've been working on a big project, and I went on vacation. End of July, first week of August, my family typically goes to the Pacific Coast in Oregon, where our family gets together with relatives and reunion type thing, and we hang out at the beach. And it's really a beautiful area. If you ever get a chance to go there, I really suggest it. So, the project I've been working on is around the concept of selling direct. But it's more than just about how to create a platform where your customers can buy direct from you. It's really something I've been working on for over 9 months and is focused on a bigger discussion about what's going on in the indie author community and should I be wide? Should I be exclusive? And I'm trying to change the conversation a bit and get authors to think about the relationship they have with their fan. Because the reality is, it's the fan's money, it's the reader's money that pays all the bills. They pay yours, they also pay the intermediaries like Amazon and Apple. So if you can build a closer relationship and really serve them in a unique way, are they prepared to buy from you direct and buy from you no matter what the platform is? Done some work around that, and I've put together a free book called Direct Sales Unleashed that you can download and start exploring these ideas. As part of this project, what I've been doing is I've been getting together some great speakers to be on the channel. Today we're going to talk with Brian Meeks. You may know Brian from his book, Mastering Amazon Ads. There'll be a link for it below. He also runs a course that's an analytics course around Amazon ads, and he has a fantastic Facebook group that he's very active in and answering questions and helping people with their specific problems. I think there's about 6,000 people in that group. I highly suggest you join it. He has only one requirement, that you buy the book and read the book. Given what he provides in that group on a daily basis, it's a pretty good value proposition. So today is going to be Brian. I've got some other great guests, like I said. Brian's going to actually be in 2 episodes because we cover 2 pretty interesting topics. Not his typical copywriting / Amazon ad stuff, although it does trickle in a little bit. I went to talk to Brian Meeks, the economist, and dive into 2 concepts. The one we're going to talk about right now in this episode is pricing. And I want to preface the pricing conversation you see that Brian and I have with some thoughts. So before I drop you into that conversation between Brian and I, let me preface some of the ideas about pricing. First off, a little bit of my background and why I have an interest in pricing. In a previous life, I was a partner in a pricing analytics business. We did pricing for distribution companies, companies like Granger and all the different catalog companies, where we would go in and use their transactional data to build a model. And if you think about it, if you have the data from a company of that size, you can really model what the behaviors are of customers and what items they're price sensitive to and what items they're not. And that's given me a deep understanding of the mathematics behind pricing and a lot of the psychology behind pricing. And most important thing that an author can take away from this is not any particular gimmick or gambit about pricing, but to have a pricing strategy, to have a theory about how you're going to price your books to the market and stick to it. Check your work with data like Brian and I talk about and test it out. Maybe what you see work for one author isn't going to work for you. The only way to figure it out is to have the patience and the deliberation to test that out. There's a lot of different theories around how you should price your books. I think the best thing for you to do is kind of take it all in, try the things you think are going to work, and just leave the rest aside. So let's dive into this interview. Like most of these, they tend to be a little long. I don't edit them down too much because there's nuggets all through it from Brian. So I don't want to take out anything, and it might be the one thing you need to hear. So let's get in there and hear what Brian has to say. Yeah, so we would in our business, the way it worked is we would get a customer to give us 3 years of their transactional data,
Mm-hmm.
and then we would do analysis on it. And when we would present and pitch to them, we were using their own data.
Sure.
So when they started arguing with us, they were arguing with their own transactions.
Sure.
Right?
And that couldn't have, the arguments couldn't have lasted very long.
You know, what the most common one was one that came from older salespeople, which would be like, but you don't understand all the nuances of this industry, right? And then you would say, well, okay, well, how did you learn how to price your products? It's like, well, some old guy taught me how to do that. When it's just kind of gut, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, what would your competitors pay to see your data and how you guys price? Oh, they would do anything. They'd go through our garbage cans if they could.
Yeah.
Well, then why won't you look at it?
Yeah. and that had to be the end of the debate.
And that usually was it. And usually we were able to show them, like they had feelings about salespeople that were selling better than others, and we could show them what was going on.
Yeah. Well, that sort of speaks to the argument I made in my post about the assumption that the $1 million author is doing things correctly is not based on any sort of data. They could be selling $1 million just because they are. It doesn't mean they're not leaving $2 million on the table. And most of them do their descriptions wrong. Now, I was just looking at, Michael. He lives 4 floors above me, literally, just on the other.
That would be Michael Anderley.
Yeah, he lives 4 floors up, and then at the other corner from where I live. And so we go to lunch and we talk about this stuff. And one of his newer releases, the one that came out in July, I looked at, and sure enough, now he's doing his description copy correctly. So it kind of warmed my heart that he had he wrote it with proper copyright, or whomever he paid to write did it. And I know he knows I don't know how many people there are in the Bella Forest cabal, but they're starting to do theirs correctly too. And so the word is getting out, which is good. Yeah. It just means that it'll move indies a little bit further.
Good. Well, so today we're going to talk about 2 things today. First, we'll go deeper in the pricing, and we're going to engage not your copywriter AMS guy, but your econ guy.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, and I think this is poignant for the whole pricing thing because, when I saw that post you did, I had actually done an experiment myself where I have a fiction pen name that I use to test things out on. I've been running it at 99 cents even outside of like launch window time. And I did that for a period of time. And then I raised the price to $2.99, basically the kind of that second floor for the 70% royalty that Amazon has set. And my experiment showed that there was really no elasticity, right? Like there was no demand response to that price change.
Yeah, it's price inelastic, exactly.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit so that folks understand what we're talking about.
Sure.
You want to give it a shot in kind of layman's terms, what elasticity and
absolutely. I can do the subject of price elasticity or inelasticity comes from economics. And in simple terms, it just means if a price is elastic and you lower your price, you will get so many more sales that even though you're getting less per item, the total profit, the amount you have in the bank, the leftover moolah is going to be greater. So it makes sense to lower the price. Mm-hmm. Price inelasticity is just the opposite. The customers don't care that much about price. They're not going to stop buying the product if you raise it to a certain point. Obviously, this all works within ranges. We can't raise our books to $100. But in the research I've done, with the books. I've studied extensively up to $5.99. Now, I believe that it may go even a little higher. I haven't done the studies yet, so I don't talk about that. But up to $5.99, the price has remained inelastic. And there's one other component, and that's perceived value, which is another sort of economics term. A book that is higher priced is perceived as higher quality, and that impacts the number of people that will choose to download it for free on Kayuu. And so you get more Kayuu downloads at a higher price point.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that is a good enough, in layman's terms, price inelasticity and elasticity.
Yeah, I think it is. So a good example of a really elastic product that price elastic product would be an iPhone.
Sure.
You know,
Absolutely.
an iPhone is something that if you drop the price, there's more demand out there to buy it at that lower price. Correct?
Yeah, there absolutely is. Now, again, I can't speak to iPhone. I do know that there was talk because the iPhone X, when it came out, I didn't get that one. I tend to get the iPhone every other update, and the X, there was talk that it would not, because of the jump to $1,000 price point, that it was going to crush their demand. Well, I don't know that. I can't say for sure if Apple is price elastic or inelastic, because I just read in the Wall Street Journal, The Daily Diary of the American Dream. I love their tagline. It's my favorite tagline of all time. I just read literally last week about, because they became the first company to hit valuation of $1 trillion with a T, and their sales of the X were through the roof.
Yeah.
Which it may well be, now that price point is out there, maybe it is inelastic, or perhaps it is inelastic within the demographic of Apple diehards. That, you know, if somebody lives and dies by Apple and buys everything new, they won't care. Whereas if you did a separate study among just the masses who are somewhat agnostic, it might be more elastic. So I really couldn't say on Apple, but I do know that when there's sales and so forth, the demand goes up. But again, one component of that is the margin. Mm-hmm. With our books, we have 70% margin. So that's a ton of margin. So when you go up, even if sales did drop off some, you're getting, you're getting 70 cents of that extra dollar.
Yeah.
And so that is a component. But again, we care about books and elasticity and inelasticity. And so,
sure. But a point with the Apple iPhone X that authors should think about is what Apple understands is they have a particular segment of their, for lack of a better term, fan base that wants the newest, coolest, hottest thing, and
they absolutely do.
Has a money to spend $1,000 on the phone.
Yep. And I would think their margin on that phone has to be spectacular.
It does. And what authors should think about is within their fan base, do they have an iPhone X?
I would think they do. I was looking at some data for an author who does very well. I mean, like 6 hours ago, I was looking at his data. And within his genre, he does very well. His read-through is exception. It's very good for the sales. The books that he sells, his price point is $4.99. For the Kayuu reads, though, the Kayuu downloads, his read-through on 2 of his series, and he writes a lot of books. He has a number of different series. On 2 of them, from book 1 to book 2, was 93%, which is
wow.
I mean that outside the romance genre, which there are romance authors that have from book 1 to book 2, 93%. But most people outside that genre, 50% is pretty solid, and he gets that in his sales. but on his Kayuu downloads, the read through is 93%, and then almost 100% the rest of the way. And then we're talking, this is 6 books, and people are getting in the first book and reading all the way through all 6 books. And so that's in Kayuu, which is a component. That's something that a lot of authors dismiss. They know that they get revenue from it. They don't really count it as they don't figure it out when they're figuring out the conversions. And right now, for every one paid sale, he's getting 2.2 people to download it through Kayuu. And so that market is massive. And those numbers for him, I looked at his data 9 or 10 months ago, and it was 1 sale and then 1.6 downloads. So there has been a dramatic shift of the avid reader going into Kayuu. And so that was a little off topic, but it is the point being that we just can't ignore the Kayuu numbers when we're figuring out what we should do on our pricing, because when it's not just the $4.99 that you're looking at. You also have to think about and I use air quotes for the pricing, but what is the value of your book to you in terms of Kayuu page read revenue? And that's something that changes from month to month, because I know we're at like 0.0046 or 456 or something like that was, I think, the May Kayuu page read rate. But that changes constantly.
Right, and they kind of set your price, your page price, so that you're kind of you're not playing with your pricing there.
Yeah, but the point is, no, you're not. But when you play with your price, I did a test with this was a different author's books, but he allowed me to sort of have his data and run this test, and we dropped it from $4.99 to 99 cents. And of course, he made a ton less revenue. There was a slight increase in sales. I mean, he did sell more at 99 cents than at $4.99, but he didn't sell enough to make up for a 10x drop, going down to 35 cents from $3.50. There were more units, but he had a very long series. And so the question was, even if he had the drop, I mean, if he went from making money on the first book to losing money on the first book because of the length of the series, if there's more people that come in the funnel and their read through, in that instance, maybe 99 cents would be better. But what we didn't count on was the massive number of drops, the number of people that stopped downloading at Kayuu because of the perceived value. So if Kayuu didn't exist, the math worked out that 99 cents would have been better because of, again, the length of the series. But because such a huge chunk of the revenue was Kayuu, when you did the math, factoring in the drop, you're losing so many Kayuu customers that now that Kayuu read through is disappearing. It was a massive loss. I mean, it went from something, and again, this goes back to authors who don't dig deep enough, who only study the one thing because it's easy to look at the number of sales. And if they just studied that, they would have made an erroneous decision with regards to that data. But when you looked at the Kayuu and factored that into, it was clear that the 99 cent drop, despite the increase in sales and the value of his read through, was still a net loser with the page read, with the damage it caused to the number of page read. So that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, well, and when I looked, I don't know if I recorded or not, but just I did an analysis doing a comparison of that demand response of 99 cents versus $2.99 and tracked that, and found that there was no viable or measurable change in volume.
Oh yeah, I've seen that many times from 99 to 299.
Yeah. So knowing that, and knowing that also through that, my read through was constant. Right.
Yep.
So that's the other thing you're saying is you got to look at all those layers.
Yep.
The Kayuu piece, the actual Kayuu reads then went up when it went to 299. So
which exactly what I would expect based on what I just told you. It's the perceived value. More people shows the book, and it's a kind of a strange phenomenon, because if you think about it, the book is free to the Kayuu reader, whether it was a 99-cent book or a $5.99 book. But it's now a question of psychologically, the reader isn't paying with cash, they're paying with their time. They're investing time to read this book, and so that's a much more precious thing to them. They've only got time to read one novel this week, so they're gonna pick one that they perceive as the best quality. And I'm sure it's the same with nonfiction, maybe even more so with nonfiction. I haven't studied that as much. I actually am planning on, I found a niche. I'm going to write a whole bunch of short nonfiction books over the next year and use those books to study the same phenomenon with nonfiction at an incredibly detailed level. I hope to crank out maybe a couple dozen books over the next year, and I will study the whole gamut of price ranges from $2.99 all the way up to $9.99. And so I should have, we can chat again in a year and talk about nonfiction specific.
Sure. Well, there's two things there that one, I want to circle back around on that perceived value thing, but with the whole thing with Kayuu, people that are making that decision, they part of that value proposition isn't specifically your book, right? They have already made a bigger decision within the marketplace about the value of a subscription versus buying books.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Right. So then within that, that you're then being considered now really on a qualitative basis, I would think.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, sort of in that same vein. An author 3 or 4 months ago she has a massive list, a substantial list. And so she polled her list about where people read, because she was considering going wide. And she found that something like 30% of her people given a choice would read one of the other non-Amazon venues. And she thought that was significant and was planning on going wide. And I reached out to her and I said, you didn't ask the right question. You need to know the percentage of the most voracious readers. Where are they located? Because a person that reads 3 to 4 books a year is not the same as one that reads 200.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're seeing. I'm sure it's the same with Netflix. The people that watch a lot of TV subscribe to Netflix and Hulu more than the occasional user. And so the people that are going to read the most books in the shortest amount of time are in Kayuu. And so if your reader base is there, somebody that could read through a 6-book series in a week, that might be 11, 12, 1,300 page reads. That's better revenue than a person that's going to read 1 book a month of yours, as far as the speed to
mm-hmm. Well, this kind of gets to something I'm getting ready to release a book on, and that is understanding your customer segmentation, right? Because
sure. Exactly.
That you have to really dig deep and understand how these customers segment because there's people that are on a lot of readers' lists that will never buy from Amazon. They just don't like Amazon, right? Now,
Sure.
who knows how many that is? The only way you can find out is to ask them or sell to them. You could sell to them direct, right?
Exactly.
But then you can't, anytime you look at a direct sales strategy, most people think it's a zero-sum game. And it's like, no, it's not about not being in Kindle Unlimited. It's how you do it so that you could sell your books direct, sell your books wide, take them out, and then move them into Kindle and serve all those different segments so that you can capture all of those customers.
Yeah. But again, that goes back to my question. If you have 18% of your customer base won't buy on Amazon and 50% of your customer base reads through Kayuu and won't buy a book, they won't pay for one.
Mm-hmm.
And those 50% in a year are going to read 5,000 books of 5,000 of your books cumulatively, and the 18% are going to read 100.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make the decision, which are you going to sacrifice? Because, well, you're right. There are people that, for political reasons, think Amazon they hate all big companies, and so they want to buy from a small company, and that's fine. But are those people the most avid readers? And again, this woman study showed that among her many thousands of readers that that wasn't the case, because she went back and she polled them some more and found out better data about where the people that will consume the most of her product actually reside, and they're in KU. And so it's
well, it's again, it's not an all or nothing game, right? Like if it means you have to be a little more sophisticated in how you run your business, right?
Yeah.
Because
now, I've not read the terms of service clearly enough, but can you sell your book direct through your website without violating the TOS of being in Kindle Unlimited?
You can't do it at the same time. So what you would do is you would sell your book on your direct website for a period of time. Yeah.
Right? Sure.
And in fact, just to kind of segue into that a little bit, is you think about if you've got a really good, strong customer base and you're not obsessed with rank, if you pre-sold your book direct, you would get all that money in 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah, and I think that being obsessed with rank for most authors doesn't make sense.
Right.
For the people that launch in the top 1,000, top 700, there's a huge value to that.
Yes.
But most people, 99% of the people, that's not something they should even be worrying about.
Mm-hmm. So in that case, what you would do is you would do a pre-sale process. You would sell direct, and then after a period of time, you would then move it into Kindle Unlimited. And the data that I've looked at shows that those Kindle Unlimited customers aren't going anywhere. They've made that decision. That value proposition makes total sense to them.
Yep, and honestly, there's no reason that they would ever even know that the book was out for a week and other people got it. Until again, obviously at some level, when you're Patterson or what have you, people tweet about things. But for most of us, it's not. No one's going to know. So if you have the customer base that will buy direct from you, then that's a fantastic way to market.
Yeah.
Now I wouldn't have any idea how to even set a website to do that. That's not my.
There's going to be a book. Don't worry.
There's going to be a book. There you go. Now that sounds like something that I think every author could take advantage of, because there is no reason that one needs to be exclusive on day one.
Well, and it gets back to that point we made about your iPhone X, right?
Yeah.
What if, depending on the author you are, what if you have that iPhone X, you have some product that you could sell that people are prepared to pay $1,000 for.
Sure.
You could sell that direct. It might not even be something you could sell on Amazon.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of think about, my Amazon ads book is, there aren't many indie authors that price their books at $9.99. And I haven't run a sale. I haven't run an ad on my Amazon ads book, which is ironic. In fact, of the 18 books that I have, Amazon ads isn't exclusive. It's wide. I've only sold a handful of copies. Why would anyone on Apple buy a book about Amazon ads? But your point earlier is some people, given a choice, would rather read it on their Kobo device or on their Nook. And if it's available, if they're an author and that's how they prefer to read, but they still want to learn Amazon ads, they'll buy it on this other venue. But again, I priced it at $9.99. I've never apologized. In fact, the first 1-star review I got was from a guy who didn't read the book. He just couldn't believe that an indie author would charge $9.99, and he wrote a scathing review, mentioned that he hadn't read the book, that he just thought it was absurd that I would charge $9.99. So I sent him a message. And normally I do not interact with 1-star reviews. But I replied and I said, you know what? If you would like, I will give you the book if you promise that upon finishing it, you'll go back and buy it for $9.99. And he said, deal. So I sent it to him. Not only did he finish the book, he has joined my group. He is a complete evangelist for I don't know how many copies of my book he's sold, but every chance he gets to tell somebody about it, he does. And when he was in Las Vegas, him and his wife took me to dinner. They spent probably, it was a nice place. My part of the meal was probably $70. They bought expensive drinks. And when my course came out, he bought that. So the guy that couldn't believe I had the gall to spend or to charge $9.99 has spent over $600 on my stuff, and he's a complete evangelist. And so, yeah, I'm fascinated by the whole pricing thing. These nonfiction books that I'm going to do, I found a segment that is, I feel, underserved. That there are very few books in this segment that are actually written by indie authors. They're almost all traditionally published. They don't know what they're doing as far as the covers, the descriptions. There's just nothing good about this segment. And so I'm going to write a bunch of short books and just absolutely own the segment. And we'll see. And then I'll probably write a book about that.
There you go.
But I will be able to get data because with my own books, I'm far more interested in the research than I am in driving sales for revenue's sake. I want to have the data because, again, then that leads to another book that I can price at $9.99.
Yeah. Well, on that point, we were talking about perceived value, and I saw your post. You and I have been talking, and I went and looked at 5 or 6 top genres, and the reality is usually the top selling person is traditionally published, and that book is priced somewhere between $9.99 and $14.99 for an ebook.
Okay, when you say top, do you mean like the number one spot, or?
Yes. Okay. So the books I looked at, these are all on Amazon are ranking in the top 1,000. Most of these are in the top 100 of their category.
Okay.
Or top 100 on Amazon. They're number 1 in the category.
Yeah.
Stuff like Handmaid's Tale and that stuff where they're
sure.
Right. So, that book is selling for, the ebook is selling for $9.99. Now it is I believe it's in Kindle Unlimited.
Really? Handmaid's Tale?
Yeah, I'm pretty
wow.
sure.
That's interesting that a book that big a deal would be in Kindle Unlimited, because the traditional publishers, I don't think, do very much with Kayuu. Maybe they're starting to do more.
I'm just going to look real quick, just so
Yeah,
I don't
I'm interested.
overspeak.
Well, I mean, honestly,
Yeah,
I
it's in
would,
Kindle Unlimited.
I haven't read The Handmaid's Tale, and I would, um,
Um,
if it's in Kindle Unlimited. I'm not going to
it,
pay.
it's
Uh,
$9.99. It's $14.95 hardcover, $9.97 paperback, and it's in Kindle Unlimited. And
wow. Yep. Yeah.
it's the
No, that's
number 6 most read book on Amazon,
wow. And just
and number 8 in the
and
store.
and and I know you told me not to talk about descriptions, but their description is almost a war crime. It's so bad. It's
Well,
my God. It's
know
just
what the only thing that really matters in that description, now a Hulu original series.
well, and that is a good hook. I mean, but the rest of it, I've yet to find my first traditionally published book that has a description that doesn't make me cringe. So, but I mean, this is and this is another thing. It's 12,178 reviews. You have to sell a lot of books to get 12,178 reviews. 4.1 average. This is another area where people stress too much about the reviews. And you know what? My books are all 4.1 to 4.4. I've got a client, his are mostly 4.6 to 4.8. And he'll launch a book and go 90 to 100 reviews before he'll get his first 4-star review. And he stresses about it. And it doesn't matter because, I mean, Margaret Atwood, she's selling lots and lots of books. And so that's that. And like you mentioned earlier, I think authors stress too much about ranking. It's fun to look at, but I believe there's this perception that once it falls, the book's done. And that's not true. My book, my best ever 10-day period of ranking was it was near 520 to 600, but really 520 to 980 over a period of 10 days. And this was 2 years after the book came out. And I just had a series of ads that crushed it all at the same time. They all turned on. And so I had this amazing run of exactly 10 days, where most of the time it was in the top 600 on a 2-year-old book. Nothing special. Didn't have a book bub, just Amazon ads. Haven't been able to do it since. But the point is, your book can always climb the charts. And so that was a little off topic there, but I think it's something people should remember.
No, I think it's a good point to make. And, back to the kind of perceived value thing is, so I think, we talked about, so there's certain readers that like they made a decision. It's like, I'm not going to be buying books. I'm sure they buy some books, but they're going to be using a subscription service to serve their needs for reading.
Sure.
There are people that are prepared to pay $15, or in this case, $9.99, but to buy the book at the same time they could get it for subscription.
Yep.
Then you look in that same category, there'll be somebody that's ranking a similar ranking, similar genre, and their book will be $4.99.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Let's just click on her. Let's go dystopian, number 1 in dystopian, and Ready Player One, Ernest Cline. Well, this is all things. This isn't just Kindles, but let's go back and I love Ready Player One. Have you seen the movie?
I have not. My kids went to see it, so they said it was really good.
It's the only instance I can remember of where a movie was vastly different than the book, which usually if you've read the book, that annoys you. And I almost think of them as two separate but similar stories because they were so different that they were both awesome. I loved the book, and in fact, I listened to the Audible book as well and loved that. And so let's just go look at the dystopian and okay. Well, it seems to default to everything now, which I find annoying. But
Well, while you're kind of resetting there,
Yeah.
so what I was getting at is I think readers are sophisticated enough to understand that, you know, the amount of money that Margaret Atwood makes on that book is not the same as an indie author. Her percentage
No,
of that is much smaller, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what you're really trying to do when you're doing this whole process and thinking as an author about getting back to how to price is there's the value of the book. And
Yep.
let's say that is equal to Margaret Atwood's book. You believe that your book is equal to The Handmaid's Tale of $10. You've cut out the middleman, being the publisher.
Yeah.
So how much of that value do you give back to your customer? And how much of that value do you keep? That's really how, in my mind, you should be thinking about the pricing of your book. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And there may come a day, and like I said earlier, I've not researched beyond $5.99, but in all my studies up to $5.99, it's been priced inelastic. It might be priced inelastic all the way up to $9.99, and nobody's really tried it. I have a fiction series that I started but I haven't worked on in 6 months, where the plan is, if I get back to it, I'd like to write 6 books in the series, just save them all, and then launch them at maybe $7 or $8.99, and which again is sort of beyond that $4.99, now $5.99, just to see what happens. Because again, I know how to sell books using Amazon ads, so I think I can do that. And maybe I think authors far too often have a low self-esteem with regards to their works. And
yeah,
the readers, nobody's going to confuse me with Stephen King or Patterson or what have you, but I don't think they care that much. They may be super excited when there's a new Stephen King novel out, but that's not every day. I mean, how often does who's the guy that does Game of Thrones? I mean, he writes a book, what, every 100 years? Something like that. He barely ever, but, when George R.R. Martin launches a book, he's going to sell a lot of them. It's going to be a big deal.
Well, and he's put out some other books other than those, and they're like, I mean, they've sold really, really well, but like most people are like, I don't want to read that stuff.
Yeah. And so the point is, the 53% of the adults in the United States, once they finish school, whether they drop out in 5th grade or get a PhD, and it's the same across the board, 53% never read a book the rest of their lives. Not one. Have you read a book in the last 50 years? 53%, no. 47% do all the reading. A portion of those readers read a lot. And the book business, it is healthy. But the point is, I think that we make our money because of the voracious reader. And, they're never going to prefer Brian Meeks to George R.R. Martin. I don't write in the same genre, but he doesn't produce enough. They have to read other things, and they're going to read my books, and they're going to like them. And they're just fantastic. And that's another thing about worrying about what everybody's doing in the genre. I talked a little bit about that in the post we brought up. The readers, looking at what everybody is doing in a genre just isn't valid data, because if one person is making a pile of money, $50,000 a month, and she says, I price it at this, and then all the other people, she must know what she's doing. She may not have any idea. She may be selling it because she writes great books. She has a rabid following. She sends out great merch. She's cultivated an amazing list. It has nothing to do with her price points. It's her fierce brand that drives her sales, and she's never once changed the price or even thought about doing something different. And so all of the other 1,000 authors that want to be like her, that assume that she knows what she's doing as far as the math of pricing because she's making $50,000 a month, they're wrong. And so the whole point of that post that we keep referencing was the idea of do it like the successful people because they must know what they're doing is a falsehood. In this business, there aren't that many people that analyze data.
Well,
there's a handful that actually do the math. The rest of them just want to write.
Well, and, you know, with what I'm doing, I'm working with quite a few authors behind the scenes on their business.
Sure.
And so I get to look behind the curtain and see what's really going on. And what the conclusion I've come to is it isn't that they're necessarily great writers. They write a book that they can have a good audience affinity with.
Sure.
It isn't a lot of things. It isn't a lot of gimmicks. The one thing that is constant in all of them is they're deliberate in what they are doing.
Absolutely.
They're making a business of this, and they're working their ass off, whether that's putting out a lot of books or making closer and closer connections to their audience. Everyone's a little bit different,
what it takes.
but that it's not, there's no magic bullet. And a lot of them will be like, you know, I never expected my books to do this well. I don't think I'm that good a writer, but like now that I found this thing, this is what I'm going to do. And I keep working that machine and refining it and optimizing it. And I would say, not to toot my own horn, but the fact that they've engaged with somebody like me to challenge them and help them up their game on the business side is proof that they're not farting around.
Oh, absolutely. And now with the Facebook groups out there, you know, Michael's group has 23,000, coming up on 24,000. My little group is 165 away from 6,000. And I mean, these communities of authors that are serious about this business. And the realities are, speaking of opening lines that are pretty good on generally bad descriptions, how's this for the first line? It's 5 words. I like to see the opening line less than 6. Winner of the Pulitzer Prize. If you win a Pulitzer Prize, you lead with that. So the rest of the description may be horrible, but Donna Tarat, she won the Pulitzer Prize. She has 25,744 reviews, 3.8 average. I mean, yes, admittedly, to win a Pulitzer, in most cases, you have to write a below average book. But I say in most cases because, the Bluest Eyes, I mean, that won a Nobel Prize and is fantastic. But again, most of the Pulitzers, they're looking for, you know, that low quality, the sort of book that people will buy but never really read. And I don't know how many books she sold, but to get 25,744 in a Pulitzer, she sold quite a few.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know.
She gets invited to a lot of parties.
I don't know many authors that have a book rated at 3.8, and I know thousands of authors. I would guess that within the authors that I know and would correspond with on, you know, a month or every other month basis, the number is probably 500-600 that I talk with regularly, and I don't think any of them have a book rated as poorly as the Goldfinch winner of the Pulitzer Prize. And so
maybe think about writing under a pen name, right? If you had a 3.8.
Yeah, well, I mean, but people should understand that they say, "Oh, I'm not that great." You don't need the 4.8 average to crush it. Yes, the Martian, I think it's 4.6 or 7. It might be 4.7. That is a fantastic book, and it's 4.7 on 30,309
Wow.
reviews. And it's the all-time, I believe the all-time leading audiobook. It's sold more audiobooks than any. I'm going to click on the audio because I want to see if they have, well, they don't have the Audible, but it's got like 50,000 plus reviews on Audible. And I mean, it's even harder to get a review on Audible than it is with a regular book. That book is fantastic. And yes, he's had a major movie by Ridley Scott and all, but it's one book. Once a person's finished that, they've got to read other things. And there isn't as big a gulf between 4.0 and 4.8 as far as at the end of the day, the person sets it down, they enjoyed the book. And you know what? They've already forgotten about it and they're going to go buy another book because that's how they relax.
Well, and that's, I think, something that, there's not many industries you can get into where that demand is so high and the what meets it is consumable. It's a consumable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something that people really have to take solace in, that within a genre, the number of people that read a book or that can read a book, even though you're saying half of them will never do it, it's still a number that's increasing.
It absolutely. Well, I think what's happening is, I think the individual, and this, I don't have data on this. This is conjecture, but it feels to me like because of things like our app, the Kindle app, I think people are consuming more books in a year because having that on your phone. I know if I am grocery shopping and there's 5 people in line, and that's going to be 5 minutes, I immediately open my Kindle app. And I use those tiny bits of time where I'm waiting for maybe I'm having dinner and, it's 20-minute wait for my steak. I'm reading during that time. And so I consume more books because I don't have to carry them around with me because of the Kindle. And so I think that 47% of the population that does read is consuming more.
Yeah.